My name is Jeremiah. I'm the guitarist for the Mobius Project. I guess I'm here to talk about my influences and inspirations. My history as a guitarist pretty much is me and an acoustic guitar sitting on the floor in the living room of an apartment. I kind of started playing guitar because I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in college. I played soccer and I lived with 4 other guys that were soccer players, and they all played guitar, and so there were 9 guitars in this house of 4 guys, and I was the only one that didn't play. And so my very humble beginnings were sitting down, picking out, whatever I could do. Plateau by Nirvana, on the guitar. Somebody showed it to me just because it was that simple. I didn't have to learn any chords for it. And that was kind of my beginning as a guitarist, just by kind of by accident. It just, they all happened to be there, and so I started playing. It wasn't until I was 21 or 22 that I actually started playing guitar. And once I actually kind of picked up and got more serious about it, much later on, I think I started, that was 2002 or something along those lines, and I started playing at that point, but not really serious. I didn't even own a guitar until a couple years later. At that point, when I bought my first guitar, then it just kind of became an obsession, and I would play all the time. But I then made a very close connection with my grandfather, who had been a traveling musician when he was younger, and he had he bought one guitar in his life, and it was he always said he was going to buy another one, and he had this running guitar fund that he was going to use no matter what. It was money set aside that my grandmother was oh, that's Grandpa's guitar fund. But he never did. He bought this one guitar in 1940 for $400. It was a Gibson L5 acoustic, with the F holes in it. It was just this large auditorium style body, bit large band style guitar body, and it was gorgeous, and it was very inspiring to me because it was such a pretty guitar and you could do so many cool things on it. And my learning to play guitar became this connection between my grandfather and I learned so much more about him at that point, that he had been a traveling musician, and he started playing more and more for me, and he started letting me play his guitar. And then when my grandfather passed away, it kind of became this sort of tribute thing to him, where I would play, and it was a way of reminding me of that, because we had always been very, very close. And so that was one of my inspirations now to this day, is still my grandfather, and kind of living up to that, his talent and those kinds of things. When I was in college, I did a lot of open mic nights and those kinds of things, and I started writing some original tunes pretty early on. But my first experience as a musician was in a band, a cover band in college, which was called Jettison, and was then eventually changed to Hoach, and we just covered all kinds of stuff. We covered Radiohead, and we did our best to cover Rage Against the Machine, and some musicians that are obviously very difficult to translate, and it never really obviously came off very well, I'm sure, but that was kind of where I got my start. There were 3 guitarists in the band, so my job was to just kind of sit in the back and play rhythm, and I did that. And after I stopped playing with them, I left college, I was kind of on my own for a long time, writing, like I said, on the floor of any living room, wherever I lived, whatever, on the couch, playing the same songs over and over again, until I moved to DC, where I met Dan, and he invited me to come sing for the band that would eventually become Invisible No More. That was my first experience as a singer, which kind of launched me into a whole new direction in terms of songwriting, because I began to look at songs in a whole different way as a singer. But that was kind of my first experience with a band. We're gonna write original songs, we're gonna do our thing, and we never really went anywhere with that, but the experience was kind of invaluable to the evolution of what eventually became the Mobius Project between Dan and Allison and I. In terms of my personal influential guitarists, there's probably 3 that I can point to and look at different parts of my personal guitar style and say, well, that comes from there and that comes from there. That I kind of built my guitar style on. And the first and most obvious is, I hope, probably Mike Einzinger from Incubus. I discovered guitarist as a word, as a state of being with him. Just he has such a direct style. He uses a lot of open strings, a lot of open chords. He likes to let the guitar ring out. He's also very melodic and subtle in a lot of ways. and he's very orchestral as a guitar player. It's very like orchestrates a piece of music, and it all fits together so well. And it's never, you know, verse chorus, bridge chorus out. It's you know, these like compositions, and I was just really appreciated that about him. And he's so technical and intelligent as a guitarist, and I always really admired that about him. And Incubus's music is just, from the first time I heard them until current, they have been my favorite band from that moment on. I just have always really admired their ability to combine art and life and music and just make it part of their being as well. And he's a very experimental guitarist. He plays with a lot of sounds, and he's able to use the guitar as like a noisemaker rather than just a straightforward, you know, chord strumming, background rhythm kind of thing. And he blends lead guitar and rhythm guitar together. And as the only guitarist in that band, he does enough work for multiple guitarists, and I've always been really fascinated by his style and his technique and his inventiveness. The second is Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead. He kind of pushes that guitar as noisemaker and envelope, and he's also in that same sort of like, you know, orchestrating a piece and making it a whole, considering it a whole composition rather than like the pop song sort of format. And his ability to blend sections and styles, and they have 3 guitars in that band, and yet it never feels like it's overly guitar driven music. And I attribute that in large part to Johnny's ability to use the guitar as this sort of like overarching instrument, and what he can do with it, and he just rocks, you know. I really always appreciated that about him. The last is Matt Bellamy of Muse. When I first learned about Muse, Matt Bellamy's just insanity on the guitar. He's this sort of controlled explosion all over the neck, and he uses every inch of the guitar, and the high strings and the low strings, and the technology that he incorporates into the guitar and builds it, and the way that he's just insane on it. It's like it's an extension of him. And I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about all 3 of these guitarists is that they're not like showy guitar players. I mean, Matt is to an extent, but his is always this like frenzy of music, and not just this is how fast I can play. And I like that all 3 of these seem to be very like they're very serve the song kind of musicians and guitarists, and just such presences in the music. They're very individual and creative and original guitarists. I mean, so those are my like direct influences. As far as inspirations, like there's a few other guitarists that have inspired like the way I want to sound, or, you know, kind of individual passages more, but just like making me want to continue playing guitar, even though I don't necessarily haven't necessarily gleaned style from them. One of them being Adam Jones of Tool, another one being Stefan Carpenter of the Deftones. The like heavy, melodic, and yet kind of simplicity to what they're doing is just, it's very brilliant and it's very genius, and I enjoy that like dark, heavy, emotive kind of guitar playing and music. Another one is Billy Howerdel of Perfect Circle. He's another one that kind of like orchestrates a whole song and makes it this like beautiful composition, but he's not doing the kinds of like, you know, pounding away that you would think comes with that sort of heavy music. And he's just, the passages that he plays throughout a song, in fact most of the time he doesn't even have distortion on his guitar. A lot of times he allows that to the rhythm guitarist, and then he just does this sort of song-serving stuff. And their compositions, I think, are very emotional and moving. Jack White is also another one that I think has influenced me to continue to play guitar, or inspired me to continue to play guitar. His ability to like strip a song down and make it just like the bare bones, but he just pounds away on the guitar, and it's, you know, again, this like emotional, emotive kind of thing. And David Grohl is probably the last one that comes to mind. He's this like all-around musician, this like Renaissance kind of guy, and no matter what, music is like in his blood, it's in his veins. And you know, I would never pull him out as like, oh, he's an amazing guitarist, but he's so solid and he is so good, and that you can't help but love what he does. In terms of bands that have inspired me or influenced me, obviously Incubus is like right there at the top of the list. Radiohead, Muse. I'm also a real big fan of The Shins and Modest Mouse and a lot of the like indie bands that have kind of come through. Manchester Orchestra is also another one that's influenced me. And for a lot of the same reasons as I mentioned, the guitarists and musicians that I fashioned my own playing after, I enjoy that, like being made to feel something. I'm also really inspired a lot by, I would say, Bjork. I know she's a vocalist, but the things that she can do and the things that she can make you feel from the way that she sings is the kind of thing that, you know, when I step in front of a guitar, it's like, if I could sing, I would do that, but I don't. I play guitar, and so I want to do it through that kind of medium. And I think that a lot of singers who are able to bring that out is another place that I get a lot of inspiration from. Any musician that does that kind of stuff, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, that, you know, with the trumpet, like I draw inspiration from what they're able to do in music and song. And I think that as a musician, like if I kind of put down the guitar and just think of myself as a songwriter and musician, like I can draw inspiration from a lot of different places. You know, I really enjoy rhythm. So a lot of, you know, there are drummers that I, you know, when I hear music, I like to hear the drums mixed high a lot of times, just because that rhythm, like, you know, you feel it kind of pounding within yourself. And as a guitarist, a lot of times I'm not even really listening to what I'm doing, you're paying attention to the drummer. And so I like to listen to the drums and feel that sort of like, you know, where it moves you. So, you know, a lot of the drummers that Dan is influenced by, I have to say, I've also, you know, I enjoy the like heavier metal aspect of drumming aspect of metal, just because it is so like emotional in that moment. Other bands that I've been inspired by, Rage Against the Machine is a really big one, because of their like activism and how music actually, you know, they do something with music. When I was younger, there was this sort of hometown band that was called Perfect Gentlemen, and they were a group of friends of mine. And being around them and seeing like the musical process, even at that sort of young age, that sort of like young naive musical process where you set up in a church annex and play to 10 people and there's like 5 bands on the bill because it's the only place to play in town. You know, getting to carry an amp at that time before I could even strum a chord, before I ever even thought of myself as musical. Like now I go back and I think about that and I draw a lot of inspiration from that, because they were doing it just because they wanted to play music, and it wasn't about fame and fortune and, you know, wanting to draw in 50 or 60 or 100 fans. It was just about, hey, look at this thing that I made, and I feel good about that. Draw a lot of parallels between that and my own musical life, in which I wasn't putting music out there. I was like sitting in a living room writing music, and it was just, I wanted the song to be done because I thought it was cool. This band is some of the first opportunity I've had to perform like original material for people, and it feels good. It feels like it's kind of coming to fruition or some kind of completion at this point to everything I've done so far. I kind of discovered